verse 1 and kind of stay on the topic of faith and what it is. And I just want to kind of start there and just review a little bit. What did you guys take away from that last week? It's kind of a famous faith passage that every kid's program makes you memorize.
I think I was reminded that certainty in our faith is important. That's really what makes our faith real, is being certain of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you do it for a day or what time or what's going on, but you gotta be certain.
Yeah. It's good. It's that confidence, and not only confident but expectant. So it's kind of an active confidence in a sense, you know. So, what else?
It's not a transaction, it's a state of being.
That's really good to remember that. So faith is not transactional in nature. You don't give something to God for Him to give you something back. And we had a pretty good discussion about that because Dennis had brought up that, and it's funny because it's true in a very distinct context, but Dennis said faith is experiential. I don't think, largely, I don't think the way we should think about faith is experientially, because if our experience is not good, that could lead to our faith being crushed, right? That's not how it's supposed to be. But the experience of seeing people walking through life with a right relationship with God and seeing the blessings that follow them, not just material blessings, but the type of person they are, the type of person they're becoming, that experientially would give you input to make you feel the confidence that I can be active in my faith too, because I see what they're doing and I see how they're growing and what they're becoming. I want to do that too. So in that very limited context, I think the expectant confidence can be experiential in that way. What about you, Jody? You taught it.
Well, no, I was just thinking, it's also in the context that in your own life, after a period of time, you can see who you're becoming. And you can see that your faith develops. It's not a give and take, and it's not, oh, my life is going great right now because I must be doing good, or bad right now because I'm bad. You just over a long, long period of time, which is why the walk is so important to stay the course, which is what Hebrews is saying.
Right.
I think what Dennis is saying is true in this aspect, is that over a long period of time, you can look and have a testimony to your own life, and your experiences in that sense. So that's all I was going to add.
That's good. The one thing that I really appreciated was thinking about faith in the context of it is a state of being. It's not. A lot of times. I guess when we grew up, we talked about a little bit of faith and a lot of faith. Now, I want to be a person with a lot of faith, but that means, in a sense, I want to be in a state where I fully love God and God fully loves me, that I can understand that, right? Because God doesn't love me any more than He loves. But when I come to a point where I can really, truly embrace the fact that God loves me, that's a state of my being. That's not anything that having a lot, having a little. That's me and how I experience life, right? So it's really a big part. Faith is how you relate to God. All right, so I'm going to move on now. So it's a firm, solid confidence. That's kind of what you were saying. Firm, solid confidence in what we hope for, which is God and God's promises. Okay. So this chapter this week, this is kind of a change of pace for the book of Hebrews. Up to this point, he has been his argument has been layered one after another, and it's been very theological in nature, quite a bit of it. This week, it's a complete change of pace, and he goes into a narrative. Just goes from this, and he goes into a narrative. And he gives a wide-ranging look at what faith and action looks like through kind of the biblical ages. And he uses two specific techniques to kind of make his point. The first is he uses the phrase "by faith." You know, by faith. We'll read it. I'm going to read this to you. You're going to hear it again and again and again. And I don't know if you guys just watched the Republican National Convention or not, but there's at one point in it where Scott Walker, he's the governor of Wisconsin. Well, he did a speech, and he kind of did the same kind of thing. I will admit it was a bit irritating to hear Scott Walker do it, but I can still remember what he said, right? So he would go along, and like it seemed like every 30 seconds, it was not that often, but it was very often, he would kind of get to this point, and he would pause, and he would go, "Because America deserves better," right? And he did it again and again and again, and he kind of invited audience participation, and so pretty soon you get the whole place screaming, "Because America deserves better." So you can see it worked, right? Because I can still remember it. I can't remember anything he talked about, but I can remember that phrase, right? And so a little bit, that's kind of what the author's doing here. He's saying again and again, by faith, by faith, by faith, by faith. And he's picked out a bunch of people through the biblical ages that the audience would have been very familiar with. Okay, the second thing that he uses, it's called a rhetorical tool. It's called an example list. And so, said ancient authors use this technique to challenge their audience to action. So they want you to do something, so they give you a list where they list that, and they go and they go and they go. And that's again what chapter 11 is. So his point is that God's people must be people of faith, even in the face of troubles and challenges. Okay, so he's going to reiterate that over and over. So again, we're going to go through the whole chapter, which is a lot of material, but at times I've heard this in church before, and I don't know if you guys ever been in church to really hear sermons on Hebrews 11. I have never in my life heard it done in one sermon. It has, every time I've ever heard sermons on it's been a topical sermon series, which has been, they term it the Faith Hall of Fame, and within the Faith Hall of Fame, they pluck out people in chapter 11, and they do a sermon just on that one single person. And so I never really got a sense for what's it doing there, and why does he list all these people so close together in a single chapter, remembering this whole book was read at one single time. They didn't cut it up into little pieces to talk about it week by week by week, right? So I thought it would be interesting to do that. Just kind of take a look at why is this whole thing in there? What's he doing? And so this is definitely, we're going to be looking for the author's main point, and we're kind of looking at the forest instead of the trees. Right? So I won't be able to develop and comment on everything because we don't have time, unless you guys want to be here for half a day. But we're just going to do some of it, and then we're going to talk about the whole. Okay? I'm going to read it all. So starting in 11:1, it says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for." So I thought this was really cool. So right off the bat, it's the ancients were commended. So basically, the people of God gave witness to God, and God gave witness to them. Well, that's kind of a cool thought. By faith, verse 3, by faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out. What is seen was not made out of what was visible. So we're gonna see this kind of theme coming back again. That what you see is coming from what you do not see. What we have hope in, we cannot see. So it's going to be the whole chapter. And this kind of goes back to the beginning. Remember, we talked about theologically, God created the world from nothing. So he's trying to bring us back together, and that's kind of what he does through this chapter. So part of the way the author is using faith, it's being sure of what is not seen. And this is the basic Christian confession that we talked about, that God created the world, creating the visible from the invisible, from the unseen. So verse 4, by faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. So we get back to that. I can remember talking about this in Sunday school, kids' Sunday school, time after time. Why was Abel's offering good and Cain's was bad? Right? So both offered what were legitimate sacrifices. But Abel's was accepted by God and Cain's was not. And we are not really told directly in the text, this comes from the Genesis, but I believe the issue was a relationship between Abel's sacrifice being offered in faith, meaning it was offered from a place of right relationship. Cain's sacrifice was not accepted because Cain's relationship with God was not right. So this goes back to that thing Jody talked about last week about faith coming from, it's your disposition towards God. It's the relationship in which you have with God. So Abel was in that right state while Cain was not. So the important point there is no sacrifice will be right if you're not in a right relationship with God. No sacrifice can fix that. Our external actions must come from the correct internal attitudes. Okay, so outward actions come from the internal heart. So if your disposition of your heart is right, the external springs from that. That's the right way to have it. The other way around doesn't feel good. Verse 5, by faith Enoch was taken from this life, so he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. But before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So Enoch, this is a fascinating thing. This would be a good sermon topic for a whole week. It's the reason why is because much of what the audience knew about Enoch comes from extra biblical literature. It comes from the Apocrypha, and it comes from the rabbinic tradition, stories that have been passed down. In Protestant circles, we don't do that a whole lot. We don't do extra biblical stuff a lot. So it's really interesting. But it would take too long today for us to develop this. But we do know that Enoch walked with God, that God was pleased with him, and God took him to heaven without him ever dying. So we go on to verse 7. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By faith, he commended the world, he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. So here, Noah too, a righteous man, and God warned him, righteous again, not being that disposition towards God, right? Noah too was a righteous man. God warned him about a coming flood that would destroy everything alive. So because he had a firm and solid confidence in what God had said, he built the ark and saved his family and the lives of all the animals. So the world was saved and recreated, basically, because of Noah's faith. So now Abraham, which is kind of the big kahuna in a sense, he introduces him here in verse 8. That says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents as Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was unable to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. So again, Abraham and Sarah, they're older, they had no children, they were past the age of having children. In their world, at this time, many would think that they had been cursed by God by not having children. So when Abraham was older, he was called by God to move his whole household, meaning him and his wife, all his servants, all his animals, all his stuff, move everything to this other place, to the promised land. God promised to make him into a great nation with millions of descendants and a beautiful land. So by his faith, his confident assurance in God, he acted on God's prompting and he went to the promised land. And in a sense, out of nothing, it wasn't possible, the nation of Israel was born. Well, verse 13, all of these people, in this case, all these people refer to Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob. Just in context, it can't be meaning because he never died. Right? All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. So this idea, it's a common one in both the Old and the New Testament, is the concept that the people of God should not live for just earthly blessings. That there's nothing wrong with earthly blessings, but that's not what you're living for. You're living for, longing for the perfect heavenly home that God has prepared for you. And it said they did not see the fulfilled promise of a great nation that would bless the world, but they did see God working, and they desired to keep the relationship with God as their highest priority. And then God, seeing their faith, was delighted to be called their God. And so we can say they didn't see the full promise, but they died in a state of trust with God. So now we got another story about Abraham in verse 17. By faith, when God tested him, he offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He had not embraced the promises. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. So after Abraham saw God do the impossible and give him and Sarah children, the author says that Abraham decided if God wanted to sacrifice Isaac, that he would raise him back from the dead. But that's another interesting place, right? Because we're not told that in the story. So that this is, again, tradition that's been passed down. By faith, Abraham believed that God would keep his promise and would create a nation through him. So Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son because he believed God would resurrect him. Now the author goes pretty rapid fire here through the next 3 generations, and it's another section I'm not going to have time to really develop, but he says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when the end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for the 3 months, and this is a big deal. Noah, another big guy, right? By faith, I'm sorry, not Moses. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for the next 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. And here the parents believed that they had received some kind of spiritual insight from God, that Moses was a very spiritually significant person. So they believing this insight was from God, they by faith basically refused the king's edict to allow their son to be killed, and they hid him. And it says, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood, so the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn in Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. So again, by faith here, Moses identified with God, and he identified with God's people at a great personal cost to him. He was basically the Pharaoh's son. He persevered and stayed the path that God put him on to lead his people. So here, again, he trusted the unseen God rather than the visible king. And he trusted God again and led the people to obey the command that resulted in the angel of death passing over them in what we know as the Passover. Then Moses showed his faithfulness as he led the people through the Red Sea to escape the Egyptians as he led them out of Egypt. And so starting in verse 30 now, the author gives kind of a sweeping history of well-known people. And the author, one of the authors I read, he said this was kind of like a song. And at this point, it's a crescendo going towards the end, where it's just rapid fire, getting louder and louder and louder as it goes. He goes into the sweeping history of people, Joshua, the times of the judges, Samuel and the prophets, the kings, and then those who suffered persecution. And so starting in verse 30, it says, by faith the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. By faith the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And what more shall I say? I do not have the time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms and ministered justice and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and they became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again, and there were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated, as the world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. So again, they're longing for this heavenly home. They didn't see the promise of the fulfilled nation, this fulfilled promise of a great nation that would bless the whole world. But they did see God working. They did see that happen. So that's the whole chapter 11. So when we look at the whole thing, what is the main point? And what's interesting is, as complex as we can make it, pulling out story by story by story, the main point is really very straightforward. The main point is the life of faith is the only life that pleases God. So we have to live lives of faith, or we're not pleasing to God. That's decision-making. So firm, solid confidence in God that results in us making our relationship with Him our highest priority. And he drove this home just with example after example after example. So our relationship with God should determine how we live our lives. And if we truly have this firm and solid confidence, how do we live our lives in light of this faith that we have? So there's a question a lot of times that gets put. And it's kind of put this way. If you really believe what it is you say you believe, how would your life be? I think one of the dangers of reading this is that, and it's actually, I think, a danger of calling this the Faith Hall of Fame. I mean, these people were commended for their faith in a specific point in their lives. That doesn't mean they exhibited these great, mighty acts, right, their whole life. When you look at the example list, you can say pretty quickly there's a lot of really bad things these people did as well, right? So this is not about creating superheroes. This is about kind of creating ordinary heroes. If you're calling heroes of the faith, right? We can all be heroes of the faith. We can do that same thing. Acting out of the courageous expectation that God is going to be who He says He's going to be. And you guys, this is definitely the other big place where we can make a mistake here is to think about God being who He could be and giving me the blessings that it talks about, and we can make it into kind of a prosperity thing where, well, I don't want any bad things to happen to me. Obviously, if good things are happening to me, that means let's have one faith. No. I mean, I think that comes from not reading the end of this chapter 11, right? Where people are getting sawed into and wearing sheepskin and goat skins. That's kind of goes back to when they put the Christians in the Colosseum and turned the lions loose on them. And, I mean, there's a lot of death and dying in this too. I mean, you got David, who was a man after God's own heart, but had an affair with someone's wife he liked and had the guy killed. Right? So, I mean, they're not perfect, but they had times of really great faith. And I think when you guys talk about different things, I would definitely not hold myself up as a great example, but there have been times in my life where my faith did take action, and it was visible. My internal attitudes and beliefs were externalized, and I took action on them. I mean, Jody and I were in Houston in a really good situation. We loved our house. My job was really good. Probably at the time was my best friend. He was my boss. It was a good deal. We entertained clients playing golf all the time. It was a good deal, and it cost me a lot to live here. I mean, we left my parents there, which were awesome grandparents, awesome parents. Left my job. Me leaving, not to just say, leaving that job, it's cost well over $1 million to me personally, to our family. Leaving that job. It was a good job. But I believe through a lot of different reasons, but I believe that God had something different for me, that God was calling me to go someplace different. It's not always easy. So, because I talk to so many people that in life, they're stuck. And they're stuck, typically, they're stuck because two reasons, but there's lots, but the two big ones that I see a lot of is they're stuck in the past and they have all these bad things going on in their mind that they can't, they're kind of stuck there. And these things just go on and on and on. They're really bad. They're not going to change, and they're always going to be like that. So that's the one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is, again, people have these things going in their mind, and they go, oh my gosh, look at the challenges that are ahead. These fears are huge that I have of what's coming up in my future. I don't know what I'm going to do. And they're paralyzed in the inaction, but in a sense, they just sit there and they think about what could happen. Might happen, it might not happen, right? But they're almost paralyzed in this fear. And it has this really crummy cycle where you're so scared about what might happen because of going back here and seeing what did happen and how bad it was. And then you go back and, oh my gosh, look at this fear. And you back to, oh, look at that. And it's just this cycle. And different people have this to different respects. I mean, different levels for sure. Some people, some people are completely paralyzed to the point that life stops. Right? But in a lot of respect, having this confident expectation in God and what that means in life it's a starting point. That's the starting point. That's the place that we have to go back to. Because we can talk all the time about how bad this was. And we can talk some out here about, yeah, that might be bad if it ever happens. But, what other things do you have in life that can help? We can deal with those things. But dealing with them from a point of, okay, who are you? What is the central point of where you are? It's there's a in my mind, there's a very big difference when I talk to a Christian versus talking to a non-Christian about these types of things. Because when you have a hope for the future, you have a confident expectation that God is who He said He is, and He is going to do things in your life that He says He's going to do, then you kind of get into, this is me, but I get into the worst case scenarios, and they're not so bad. If I die, that's not so bad. I feel bad about the people left behind, but it's not so bad for me. And again, experientially, back when I did make a ton of money, and now when I'm not making that same kind of money, it's nothing better than making a ton of money than this making the money that I make now, right? So there's these things that happen in life where you see, okay, I've been in this situation, I've lived this is the result. I've been in this situation now, I see how it's going, I see the result. I've been in this situation now, things don't have to be the same. How can I be different? How can I live my life out of this confident expectation in God and my relationship with Him? Things can be different. They don't have to be the same. They don't have to be the same. I'm not saying to be stupid either, just go off and do anything and say, woo, no. Living wisely. Living wisely. Okay. Comments, please. Yes.
I think he's also showing that God has a really long track record. He's from Cain and Abel all the way. This is like
present day,
from the hundreds of years of history, probably. This one chapter. So he's recalling to the Hebrews, who were basically Jews, right? God is faithful, and they were coming out of being Jews to being Christ followers. And then in the next chapter, he starts off, therefore, since we have all of these witnesses that testify to faith, testify to God's faithfulness, let's press on. So this is confirming what you said there.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you hit on right there that I didn't say is that many times, like for instance, you guys, if you get a love letter, okay, versus you read a technical manual on your lawnmower, and you read, say you read a page of both, what are the different, how do you feel differently, right? Emotionally, right? Emotionally, the one way, really like, this is really nice, versus, okay, what do I have to do next? Okay, I've done this, be careful with the gasoline, right? It's a checklist, right? Which is, that's what a manual's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to tell you, make sure you put over your gas for this particular engine, make sure this, right? Over here, this is it's what poetry is about. It's about what songs are about. It's to engage you emotionally. This is what the author's doing here. This is why he switched into this different mode. He went into the mode to kind of tap into the emotions and basically say, look at what God is doing throughout history. But yeah, the individuals I've talked about, they didn't see the ultimate promise, which was the ultimate, which the Hebrews did see, is they were looking forward to a time when you're going to bless the nations, and then Christ comes into the world. Christ has now come into the world. The Hebrews saw this. Now we're in the new covenant. The Hebrews saw this. So the great cloud of witnesses is bearing witness to the fact that now these people were in the old covenant and they're now in the new covenant. These are the people that ushered in the new deal, the new covenant, right? So now the fulfillment is starting to happen in a much bigger way. They didn't see it happen, but these Hebrews are seeing it happen. Ultimately, we'll see it happen at the end of the time, right? But that's kind of what that was about there. But you guys, that's the main point. That's the main point. Engage the people emotionally, help them to see that God broke into our world in the person of Christ, and he is changing things towards a goal that he set up, and we can have confident assurance of where the program is going. So stick with the program. That's what these guys are, right? They're authors fearful that they're going to shrink back. Stick with it. God is who he says he is. Here's examples throughout the biblical ages. Stick with it. Stay the course. Doug.
I appreciate that. That's one of the things that sticks out to me in this, and in contrast to what I see a lot in American Christianity today, is that the most important thing about faith is not the faith, but the object of the faith. And here it talks about how God worked in so many different people's lives throughout history and accomplished his purposes. And as you explained, that these were not perfect people. So what I see a lot today is this idea of faith in faith. It's kind of like, if you just had enough faith, then all these good things are going to happen to you. But that's contrasted to what's taught here, is that for a lot of these people, they didn't see the full realization of the promise that God made to them. I mean, when Abraham died, his descendants as numerous as the grains of sand, that had not yet happened. He never saw that in his lifetime. In fact, he probably just had Isaac when he died. So there is a complete misconception today about what faith is. And I think too often faith is something we generate internally. We have this great, whether it's emotion or whatever it is, and with people, if you hear people tell you or tell someone you don't have enough faith, Well, the important thing is not how much faith you have. Even a little faith in the right person, that being God, is going to be sufficient. I mean, what did Jesus say? If you have the faith like a mustard seed, which is very small. So I appreciate what you're saying here, because I think that puts it back in perspective, and it corrects, I think, a lot of the misconceptions people hear today.
That's so if I'm thinking about it right, because we say that like faith isn't a transaction, do you think that it's accumulative throughout a life of faith? Like you have faith, they say you have faith in small things, and over time, as it probably builds. I mean, I don't mean it's a transaction, but these people that are listed did these big things, but they didn't come cold turkey to a big action of faith. So probably it's a lot of time of faith,
Building trust.
building trust. Yeah, in building trust in God and building that faith over time, continually going. Even though you have you got like David or whoever with the big gigantic scripts, still always like falling back on that faith and realizing you got it. Because if the life of faith is the only life that can please God, then it must be. It seems to me it's accumulative. I don't know if I'm thinking about it wrong, but it seems like it would build up over time and time again of acting in faith over.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying kind of sort of what Dennis was talking about, how, you know, so again, don't mishear me here, but the little sliver that we can talk about faith being experiential in nature, right? When you actively trust God and you act on that faith, and then God in turn, responds, which is back and forth, right? Over time, we're going to see this, and we're going to see this building. We're going to have more faith. Okay, I see. I mean, if I look externally at the things that happen in my life, there's aspects to which I could point back and say, I gave up a lot to come here, and I had a lot of bad things happen to me. Therefore, I'm not sure that was a good deal. Right.
But I mean, I'm not trying to look at it at all like if I have faith, good things happen.
Right.
It is like even when bad things happen, I have faith, so I can press on to the bad things. Because there's some people the bad things happen their whole life, all the time, and sometimes we all feel like that's happening to us, even though other people look up from the outside and say, no, it's not happening.
Right.
But I'm really terrible like that.
Yeah.
But so I would just think that God gives it. He does give us something in that, but I just don't want to think that it's like I have faith, so I get these good things. But if I have faith, the good things that happen, if we look and see what that good thing actually is, it's not like earthly blessings. The good thing is being given that strength to live a life that pleases God, that He would be pleased. It seems like it, because the more we exercise faith in little things, the more we can press on, and that's the good thing. And that's the good thing. It could be in circumstances that are horrible,
Right.
but that's the good thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of like that example that Jody gave last week, right? So when she says, I'm flying in to SeaTac at this time, can you be there to pick me up? Yeah, I'll be there, right? So she's not in her mind thinking, wonder if he'll come or not come. I mean, is he going to show up to get me, or is he going to decide not to show up to get me, right? She has a confident assurance that I'm going to show up, and she feels good about that, right? So how much more would our faith and confidence in God be seeing that my character is nothing like his, right? And we can have that kind of faith a little bit. So I think you're right. As you go on and exercise your faith, and it says you exercise that confident assurance that you have in the promises of God and the things that you see God want to do in your life, I think it becomes easier and easier to do bigger things.
She kind of, in a way, answered my question, because I was just going to say, well, what if she didn't show up, or what if you didn't show up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think, like, for me, like, this is just for me, like, faith oftentimes is for me more like an eternal thing, because like it doesn't mean that, kind of like what you guys are saying, is that like having faith that everything's going to work out, you know. But if you believe in God and you have faith in God, it will work out, because that working out might mean that your salvation and you know, being in God, you know, in heaven forever and glorifying Him. So,
Right.
I mean, for me, it's more like an eternal thing.
But what you said just made me think too, but I think sometimes having faith means, you know, things happen to us, and sometimes even bad things, but we don't always know how we're affecting someone else by how we lived through things, you know, so I always wonder if in heaven one day you'll get there and you'll find out that people were watching, or whatever, or that you helped someone or blessed someone without even knowing it
Yeah.
because of how you, so.
And Joey, that was what I was thinking as Jim was talking, and what you just shared is exactly true. I mean, those are the facts, and yet what is different is perspective. And I think the true perspective is, who are the lives that are impacted because of the decision you made? Now, the decision was not a real positive thing for your financial well-being, but for the spiritual well-being of many people. How many people have been blessed by your faithfulness? And then exactly what you just said, for those of us who have seen you walk through the struggles you've experienced, how many other people's faith have been strengthened, and how many people follow God because of your example? And Jim, I'm almost getting emotional like you sometimes, but I want to say, as one who has watched you over the years, I'm very grateful that you did that, and I'm very grateful that you've given up that $1 million, because I've had the chance to be a part of your life. And that's, I hope when it's all said and done, you realize it was worth it, more than worth it.
Rebecca, come back.
Oh, I don't know. It's probably it's not relevant now, but I was just going to say that I like that they included Sarah in this list, because it says her, by faith Sarah, who was past childbirth, enabled. She was able to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And yet when she first heard the promise, she scoffed.
She laughed.
I mean, so it wasn't like she was faithful she heard it and she's like, oh yes, I know that God's faithful, he's going to do that. No, she scoffed and she laughed and she sinned. So it's not like your faith has to be perfect throughout a situation. Your faith has to be this perfect, unwavering faith. I mean, because at first when I read it, I thought it was saying that by someone else's faith that happened, because it says by faith she was enabled to bear children. So I'm like, oh, okay, by Abraham's faith.
Mm-hmm.
But but that's not what it says, because it says here she considered him faithful who had made the promise. So anyway, I kind of totally off subject, but
This list all the way around.
your faith doesn't have to be this perfect thing from the beginning of the situation to the end of the situation.
Well, even Abraham, lied a couple times about Sarah being his
Yeah.
sister. I mean, so there's another big guy who, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I keep thinking of when I think of this list of people is, and in the end, the kind of twist at the end of Hebrews 11, like, well, it's actually for a bigger picture, it's a wider lens, I wonder if faith isn't so much for our benefit, but faith is for God's benefit. In other words, there's natural benefits, like consequential benefits from God blessing us when we have faith, right? Like, yay, we have a good day, or yay, we reap a blessing or something. But frankly, God doesn't have to do that. We're grateful that He does, but He doesn't have, there's no rule book that says He has to. And so I think of folks who, and even in my own life, when I've had every, upper middle class, third world benefit has been stripped out of my life for the moment, and I think, my faith, when everything's stripped away, it's just, well, God, I believe you're good. And my definition of good is sometimes skewed by my privilege. And so I don't always know what good looks like from where you sit on your throne compared to where I think I'm privileged to sit. And sometimes I think of somebody who says, well, I still have faith in God, even though horrendous things have happened to them. And I think, how do they have, my faith is more transactionary. In other words, it's more trust. But I think somebody who, they can still say, I have faith in God. And I think that when everything's stripped away, it's just, well, I believe you're still good, God. And I don't even always know what good means. But I know you have my good at heart. And my good might just mean, it might mean just salvation. It might mean this world is horrible for them. And that's still God's good. And it doesn't make sense from our privileged perspective. It just doesn't. It doesn't. But from where God sits, because we don't understand what's to come. And so I sometimes think, well, maybe our faith, if it's just that may be just enough. That may be just the most amazing thing. And when, by comparison, when we look back, we would say, this was nothing. The benefits of our faith down here was nothing compared to it's got to be so glorious. Christ has been working on it all this time, right?
That's kind of what Paul says, the verses where he said, I think I read a couple last week, but nothing will compare. He talks about his sufferings being a momentary affliction. And he suffered greatly, but it's just a momentary affliction. You're like, wow, that's somebody who understands what's coming a little better than I do.
I think what you're getting at is it was like a really a revelation in my own thinking, my own way and we talked about this in the group we were talking about sin, but when I started to understand sin, not in terms of just right and wrong, but I started understanding it in terms of relationally, right? Relationally, how does sin affect me and how does it affect other people? I think exactly what you're saying is very similar to our faith expressed relationally. We're right with God, and that's not all by itself. But our faith in God also transforms our relationships with other people. And then in a experiential sense, our faith is also going to inform, because it's faith in action, basically. Like you heard that over and over in chapter 11 about people. They administered justice. They talked about the king period, the judges period, where all the deeds they do, right? So faith does inform your actions. Faith in action, right? Confident assurance in God in action. Okay? So there's that aspect too, but that flows out of the relational aspect of it. That's why Cain's sacrifice was not acceptable to Abel's was. They both did the same thing, but one was accepted and one wasn't. It was a different offering, but technically they were both good. So, same thing. It's really interesting. But I definitely think with what Doug said too is that we think it's faith in faith, or it's faith expressing itself in stuff. That's what we're blind faith, and I'm not talking blind faith. Well, very good, you guys. Now, I did a great thing, and I didn't take the offering. So I'm going to pass the offering back to you close our service. Dear Father, we are thankful to you, and well, it's good for me. I don't know if it's good for everyone else. Good for me to listen to chapter 11 of Hebrews all together, not plus and 11 individual stories, but to just hear again and again, example after example after example. And we can look at that in our own lives, the heroes of the faith of old, plus the people in our lives today, where their faith in you expressing itself relationally can really change our life, and we can do the same for others. And Lord, that you'll help us to keep our relationship with you as our highest priority, and that we can seek to live a life that honors you and glorifies you, and that we can really be faithful in that respect. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
You guys, take about 20 minutes to kind of